All right. Hello, everyone. This is our talk on reporting dashboards and the value that they can give you, and specifically the tool that we've built, Reporter. So my name is James. I'm test engineering lead at Fiserv, and this is Xiaoxing. He's one of our test engineers and the guy that actually built Reporter. We work at the Auckland office in New Zealand, for those of you that don't know, and we work mainly with mobile technology. So before I go any further, some thanks. A big thanks to the three wise men, Sumit, Tim, and most importantly, Brian. Without them, we wouldn't have a test automation practice at Fiserv. They've been incredibly supportive the whole way through. And then a big thank you to the team who have ridden this wave with us and have bought into the process. And then, of course, to the Selenium conference organizers. This has been fantastic. So I'll go through and pretty much give you the story of automation at Fiserv, the ups and the downs and the challenges that we've faced, and how reporting has helped solve those. And then once you're all asleep, I'll hand you over to Xiaoxing. He'll give you a demo and also the technical details. So we come to conferences like this, and we sort of get a skewed view of automation. It looks so easy. You have these people come up, Google's running 1 million tests a day. But for some of these bigger corporations, sometimes implementing automation isn't as easy as it seems. And in Fiserv's case, they really wanted to do automation, and in fact, they tried lots of times. They even had all the ingredients, but things just hadn't gone right. So they literally had automation everywhere. They were using all types of automation frameworks and all the different automation tools, and also all types of different outputs. But this wasn't even their main problem. There was virtually no visibility. And this is a quote from one of our developers as I was trying to find the tests. So we didn't know which projects had tests, what they were testing, the coverage, when these tests were being run, or I guess even if they were being run. Was anyone checking the results? These were things that no one really knew. And so people had started to question, why are we doing this? We're investing all this time and money into automation, but are we actually getting the value back from it? So like I said, we're from New Zealand. I have to have at least one Lord of the Rings slide to get back into the country. Here it is. But I was brought in 1.5 years ago to change the test engineering practice at Fiserv and make it more robust. And so we started doing something which probably most of you are familiar with. We built a framework. And we use Selenium for all of our web tests and Appium for the mobile ones. And we standardized everything. So we've got a standard place and source control for our tests, a relative path to the project. And we started using standard email output formats. And this was great. Everyone loved it. But we still had a problem. Turns out no one reads emails. Even I had a filter to get rid of these automation emails. There's so much or so little value in them, and so much information. It's all static, and there's no real context. So we knew we had to change something. And it was about this time I started looking for alternatives. And I saw Allure. And Allure was actually presented at this conference last year. And it is beautiful. I strongly suggest everyone here check out their talk or go to the URL, it's on the slide. And they did things which I hadn't seen before. The way they aggregated data for the tests and aggregated the errors, it was better than anything that I'd seen in the open source community. So we thought, let's do this and everything will be great. We all work in automation, or most of us here. My goal was to be able to work remotely from a beach and have the automation run every night. I thought, Allure will fix this. Yes. But automation, at least for us, has been a marathon, not a sprint. So we've had problems. And they're probably problems that you guys are familiar with as well. So we're running thousands of these tests all the time, from unit to integration to UI. And our UI tests are slow. So our feedback cycle is slow. And that's what automation is supposed to speed up. We've also got hundreds of testers involved when writing these tests. And not only just testers, devs and BAs. And some of our junior testers and BAs, they're not experienced with writing code. Or maybe even using source control. And so even with like a pretty good training program that we've set up, we're still having some teething problems. And those teething problems lead to something that everyone is familiar here, flaky tests. Our testers and devs and BAs, they didn't really know about race conditions or how to make your tests robust. And this was the proportion of our tests being flaky was exacerbated by the fact that we're running them on devices. And devices are hard. I started working in automation back in Selenium 1.0, and I thought browsers are hard. And they were. And to be fair, Internet Explorer and Edge, like we saw yesterday, it still is. But devices are even harder, and it seems to be, at least for us, that anything could fail. We'd have random updates on the device, Wi-Fi go down, they'd run out of battery, maybe even they'd run out of memory, or storage space, we couldn't even install the apps. And so this would lead to pretty much just the most random of crashes, just inexplicable. And of course, to make things even more difficult, we're running these on hundreds of devices. We have to certify that our app works across all of these devices for our clients. And one of the big drivers for automation was the opportunity to reduce this from being an incredibly manual task to maybe something that we can automate. So we had to do this. And this is probably where I should say that maybe the cloud can help you here. I certainly would have pulled out less hair during this process. In fact, I was thinking about it last night, and I think that Source Lab's new motto should be, move to the cloud, save your hair. And if they put that on a t-shirt, I want some of the royalties back. So you're probably familiar with these flaky tests and devices and whatever. But one thing that I hope you're not as familiar with, but we've all experienced here, is network problems. We were just about to release our biggest project for the year, and automation was supposed to reduce this regression cycle. Suddenly the network's going down 2-3 times a day, maybe even more. We've grown from a very small startup company being acquired by a big corporate, and our infrastructure hasn't kept up. So we're running these tests continuously, but we're having hundreds break all the time because maybe DNS goes down or the firewall goes down. And so people are starting to question again, why are we doing automation? And it leads to something which is, I guess, somewhat common. It's almost like the boy who cried wolf syndrome. The credibility of the automation just goes down. People expect it to fail, so they stop looking at it. This is incredibly dangerous. Again, it's like, why are we doing this if we're not getting the value from it? And these poor testers that did look into these failures, they're overloaded with information. There are hundreds of tests failing a day, maybe even thousands. And they're new to this. How are they supposed to be able to debug what's going on? And they didn't even really know what was supposed to be happening in the apps. And they're new to these tests. For them, it was sort of like, I don't know, a random CSI episode where they're trying to find this bug. And they've got this incredibly blurry image. They clear it up, and they zoom in a little bit more, they clear it up, and suddenly they can see a watch. And in the watch's reflection, after they zoom in, they can finally see the problem, and then they can troubleshoot it. And they're just wasting all of their time doing this. We needed to provide a cleaner, faster solution. But my dream of living on the beach was shattered. I knew we needed to do more work. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have dealt, again, with these problems. But we needed something new to fix them. And we've looked at better test runners. And we've tried separating the tests and maybe even having automated practices to tag them and move them into these test runs. And these have worked reasonably well. And maybe in the future we'll work on even a smarter test runner. But one of the things that has helped us the most was building a reporter and using a test dashboard. So a reporter isn't one of these emails that you send out. It's a centralized dashboard for all of your testing reporting needs. So all of our devs, QAs, BAs, and managers, this is where they go if they're interested in testing. And we've made it incredibly easy for them to use. They can jump to their project, see summary data, they can go into one of the test runs, or they can even jump into the tests and see the same aggregated information that Allure provided, which is what made it so invaluable to us. Aggregating both the reports, the errors, and also aggregating the data for these tests, all in one centralized location. And we're filtering out the information that's not needed. If you're only interested in the summary, we've got a summary page for you, how all of the different test runs are going, from the smoke test to the larger regression tests, and the unit and the integration tests. And we've just introduced BDD testing at Fiserv. And so our managers, they want to see both the number of tests added and the trend lines. So we've got that available to them. And some of our testers, they don't want to see all the failures for the test runs. They only want to see the differences between the last couple of runs. So we can actually compare the last runs, or compare whichever runs we want, and see which tests have newly failed. Maybe someone else is looking at the previous run, and this test is only interested in solving the new problems, or the dev. And so we can actually see that information right there, and it's easy for them to get to. And we're helping pick out the flakes. And by doing this, or to do this, let's say we've got a test run of 500 tests. And 400, they pass. It's magical. But the next 100, they break. Maybe the device has gone offline. And so we don't want to have to rerun the entire run, especially with device testing being so slow. We enable our testers to go back and run just those 100 tests, and then consolidate this into one report. So they can see, I guess it's more what's happening on the actual application rather than what's happened in the tests. Because we want to show the valuable information to some people is not how the tests have run, but how the application is functioning. And that's something that we don't often do. And to help further mitigate these flaky tests, we're providing you with the history of these tests. So you can go into one test that you're interested in and see, oh, okay, it's failing every once in a while. It's probably flaky. Maybe I need to look into this some more. And along with this, because we've got the history of the tests, if a test has failed, we can compare it with the last passing test. And this is helping our newer testers, again, that aren't familiar with our applications or even the tests themselves, maybe they've moved teams, suddenly they can see side-by-side screenshots and go, oh, okay, it's obvious why this test is failing. Suddenly this button isn't here. And to help with all of our device testing, our device certification, you can do the same side-by-side comparison with tests that have run across various devices. So if we do a test run on, say, all the Samsung Galaxy phones, we can have them side by side and go through the steps and make sure that all the images look the same. And one of the things that we really struggled with was having a good triaging process. Because all these tests were failing all the time, people had stopped being in the habit of actually going into these runs and making sure that they'd fixed and looked at the tests. And without doing this, the automation slowly loses value. People forget about it. So as soon as a test is finished, we start to pick them up. So the slow cycle of feedback that we were having with our UI tests, waiting for the entire run to finish, that stopped. We get faster feedback. But we also enable people to both delete runs, which aren't useful. Let's say, hopefully this doesn't happen again now that we've got better hardware, but let's say we've had a network failure and all of our tests have failed. So the run really isn't of any value, and putting it on the dashboard actually it's not a great idea to put that on the dashboard. It moves the focus away from the actual results that you want to see. So you can now delete those. But you can also manually comment on builds. So we'll go back to that example of the 500 tests, and 100 are broken because the device went offline. We can tag it and say, look, this test run, it broke, the device went offline, I'm rerunning the tests. So no one else needs to look at that build anymore. And we can also do this down to the individual test level. So we can say, look into a test which is broken, find out that it's actually manually passed, and tag it as such. Put a comment. I ran this on this device and it passed. Or maybe there's a bug, and you can say, same thing. I ran this test, it failed, there is a bug, I've looked at it. And we've got a pending queue, so you can see, oh, this many tests in this run, they haven't been looked at. And we provide this information back to the managers. So the managers can see this view of how the application is functioning, rather than, again, how the tests are functioning. And this has stopped them running around, the sky is falling, why is the automation broke? And instead, we've got these cleaner results, which are more valuable to them. And we've helped the testers. They're now able to easier debug these tests. And with, like I said, getting rid of these flaky tests. So our network problems, or maybe our devices, aren't as big a deal as they were previously. And we can confidently push the errors to the devs. But one of the things that I guess isn't talked about with automation enough is the way that it's actually brought our teams together, and especially how Reporto has helped with this. Our devs are now helping our testers more, and our testers, because of this, are more technical, and they're finding more interesting bugs when they're doing manual testing. The devs don't want to see a red test on their dashboard that they're looking at for their unit tests, so they're more likely to jump into the Selenium tests and teach the testers, why is this test flaky? Look, there's a race condition. And our testers themselves, they've got a better overall view of our automated test coverage. They can see all the other tests that are being run, so they know where to focus their manual testing efforts. So we're getting faster feedback cycles not only from the automation, but also from the manual testing, because it's more pointed in the areas that need work. And so we've had great success from implementing this tool Reporter. And it's at this time that I'd like to bring up Xiaoxing, who, like I said, developed it, and he'll give you a demo, show you how it works, and then talk about the technical stuff. Then maybe questions.
Thank you. Let's dive in. Just let me show you how it looks in real time. It's demo. It's built with Ruby on Rails, so it's just a simple traditional Rails app. You can just get a code and run Rails server, and we'll start. And a word in advance, all the data inside this demo they are all just randomly generated, so it doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Here, sorry. Here is the main page. You select a project to get started. When you select project, and the navbar becomes more detailed. And this is the summary view. This is where the managers are interested in. It just gives you overview of each individual run types. Yeah, we categorize our runs in one project. So there's a mini trending view, and I hover on it, you'll see the numbers. And when you click the view button, you can see the detail of the last test run. Here's the test run view, and this is a summary of this test run. Just some numbers, how many passed and pass rate and stuff. And the left-hand side is the tree view. They are currently they're in the feature view. They're grouped by features. By feature you can have different terminology for that. We call it features. And when you click on it, you will see a detailed test case. This will show you all the details about the test case, the times and the steps, and the screenshots. They're just random pictures, not random. Select them. And this one is a problematic one, and you can click on the problematic step, and you will see the error message thrown from the code. And here is the history. History shows all the previous runs of the same exact test case. This is good to, for example, normally we have a regression run. It's normally run nightly. So when there's some new failing tests, we want to see whether it's always the case or it's a new failure. And when you click on the, sorry, it's already passed there. When you click on one of the history item, you will see them in side by side. It's easier for the testers to spot the problem. And also, as James mentioned, you can comment on the test case. For example, there's a failure, but I manually tested, and it's passing. So I will say, put some comment and change the status into pass. This is the way we triage the problems. And when you refresh the page, you will see the comments. You can add multiple comments on it. And when you go to the test run view, this will be a list of test runs for this specific project. And there are types, start time, and duration, how long it runs. And the status badges, the first set of badges is the original status, how many pass, broken, failed, and the pass rate at the end. The second set is including the comments, the changed status. And the little badge, 26, at the end of it, it means how many tests is not taken care of. It means they are not passed, and there's no comment on them. So this is more like a to-do list for all the QAs and developers. Our goal is to just zero it. And you can select multiple, to specific 2 test runs and enter diff mode. Because the these test data, they are just randomly generated. So these two test runs are completely different. Normally, when you diff the same test run about different runs, like the run from yesterday, you will see a newly passed, newly failed, just newly status changed. This is easier for the developers and the testers for them to get a quick view of what's going on, what's new, what's been fixed. And also, like James said, you can filter out the noises. Something that is not meaningful, you can just delete it, and of course you can restore them later. Yeah, and then there's trending. This is the most of the managers are interested in. This will be a detailed trending page, and you can filter out some meaningless small tests. Maybe they're just someone is debugging and accidentally dropped the result in. And then you can toggle between manual mode, or just this is just include the manual comments or not. And currently we have two styles of graph, line graph and the array graph. Yeah, I think that's about it. Oh no, yeah, there's nothing for handset testers, because we build apps for different companies, and yeah, it'll be app for different companies, and it has to run on different devices. And there's more and more modules coming out, so you want to see the difference between different devices. So here is the handset view. They will group test cases by their just definition, test case name, and all the steps. The only difference between them are the tags. So when you enter this mode, you will see all the screenshots side by side on different devices. It's this is easier for manual, just eyeballing the visual defects between different device or platform. Yeah, the only difference will be the tags. And also at the end, you can group them by failures, by error messages. This gives you a more clear priority, what to do, what is most important thing to do, what fails most of the tests. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that's generally what it looks like. And how do we build it? As James mentioned, we used to use Lua. Lua will be our go-to tool to build the report. So we have a lot of legacy result data comes from Lua. So that's we don't want to throw it away. So we need to use. We need to include the Lua results into our report system. So we're still using Lua as our standardized result format, because number one is this legacy data, and then most importantly, the design, the Lua report result is designed with BDD in mind, so you can add steps and attachments. In our case, mostly the screenshots, and more even log files from the platform onto the to the result, attach them to the result. So yeah, we just use a Lua adapters, convert in our framework, in our automation script to generate the Lua results. But instead of using converters to convert all the other format like JUnit results and NUnit result or whatever into a Lua result, we take another approach. And I'll explain later about the data part. And this is a Ruby on Rails project, basically, just MVC. You have a fancy model and a powerful controller and a beautiful view. And we want to push flexibility to the limit, which means because of the requirements, we need to include all kinds of different data source from different format. So how do we do that? First step is to make the model thinner. And the model is powered by MongoDB. And the advantage of MongoDB is that it's schemaless. So we can just literally put anything into it and without worrying about data migration and the data to design the perfect data structure, which is impossible. Because the requirement always change and there's new demand on features all the time. And yeah, and how thin we can make it. This is how thin it is. The test case model is our most complicated data structure, but that's it. If you are familiar with the Ruby on Rails, you can get the same effect with the active record, but it's different because the active record is actually backed by the database schema and all the migration stuff. Now we don't have any of them because it's just a hash. Everything just key values inside this hash. And next, we want to simplify our controller. Because controller can be a performance drag sometimes. And it's not easy to maintain because it got a lot of code in the controller to do the fancy stuff. For example, if you want to do something that you don't have that in mind when you design the data structure, you happen to do the very complicated circle queries. And imagine that the test result list view you see before, there's a lot of badges of the status. Imagine every single one of the badges is calculated from the database. That's going to be painfully slow. So instead of doing that, we do the one at the bottom. You want a pass rate, just to get the test run, and the pass rate will be there. And how do we do that? How can we achieve that? This is our secret weapon for the data part. Datacraft. It's a open source ETL project. How many of you are familiar with the concept of ETL? Okay, a few of them. ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. It's a data manipulation process. The key part is you can define a data source and process them row by row, and then distribute it into different multiple destinations. This tool do exactly what it is. It process the raw data and distribute into different places, different consumers, and finally build something that is very powerful and usable. This is an example of the Datacraft script. We have our own domain-specific language. And this is basically just a Ruby code, but with a DSL inside. You define from is the data source, or where all the data was stored, the plain text, XML files, and tweak each row, format it into the way you want, and maybe dismiss some invalid data. And it can just distribute it into different places. Like the first one, pretty obvious, we need to store it in the database. And we also need to keep track on the test suite. So we can just group them. And finally, we accumulate the number of tests and with the status and update test run summary. That's where you see previously we can just directly retrieve the pass rate from the database because it's already there when the data imported. And we can do this because in this case, in this scenario, all the data is pretty much static. It never changes after you imported them into database. Yeah, mostly never changes except the comment part. With MongoDB, it's very easy. Just attach them into another field. Don't need to worry about the migration stuff. And the Datacraft is powerful. Now it supports parallel processing, but with Ruby's global thread lock, you can't really take advantage of multi-core system. But most of the time, the bottleneck is not in the Ruby part. Because people are complaining, why choose Ruby? Ruby is slow compared to other programming language, maybe. But most of the time, it's fast enough. It's not, most of the time, it is not the bottleneck. The bottleneck falls on the IOs, expensive IOs over network or database. If we can put more energy into optimizing those parts, it will significantly boost the performance. And Datacraft also support hooks and even benchmark. You want to see, after you have your script, you want to see which part, drag this script down. For more details, you can just search Datacraft in GitHub. It's already, now it's open source. This is how we make the data powerful itself, so that we can make the model and controller thinner, and we don't need to worry about changes when it comes to new format or new data source or new requirement from the managers. Yeah. And finally, the view. It's same good view. And you can just throw anything you fancy onto it, fancy technologies onto it. And now currently the Reporto project, it's built for our internal use, so it's tailored for our needs. But on the roadmap in the future, we want to make it modular. We want to adopt React.js, make every single widget, you can call it widget, modular, and you can just turn it on and off, and we eventually open source it, and everybody can contribute to the project to just attach your new module onto it to make it more general, and you can just grab it and, like playing Lego, just build something you like. Yeah, that's about it. And finally, the feedbacks. Okay.
They originally said positive feedback to my boss, but I was worried that he was going to get spammed. So yeah. Oh, no, well, if anyone has, I don't know what the time is. Yep, sure.
So, quick question. I noticed a lot of talk about manual in there, or not a lot, but I saw manual here, manual there. So, looking at some of the data structures, you were talking about test cases, test plans. Do you guys use this for test management tool? Is this, a test management tool, and how does that kind of get tied into your manual? This might be an offline question.
Yeah. Briefly, we don't use it as our only test management tool at the moment. We've got a roadmap plan to eventually have all of our test cases written in SpecFlow. And so they will all jump onto this reporting tool, and maybe to use that just in the future, but that's, like 6 months away. We'll see how it goes. Cool. Any other questions? Or, well, we'll be around if anyone actually wants to ask questions after the break or after lunch, so you can all.